Dear ladies and gentlemen, 女士们、先生们，大家下午好. A very warm welcome to our session today, Energizing a Sustainable Transition at the World Economic Forum's The New Champion Dialogues 2022. My name is Martina Fuchs. I'm a business journalist and TV anchor at China's Xinhua News Agency based in Zurich and London, and it's my great honor to moderate this panel today. 我是 Martina， 我是住在伦敦和苏黎世一个商业记者，在新华社工作。我非常荣幸今天主持这个小论坛，然后主持这个讨论。A few housekeeping items to start off with. This session is going to last for 60 Swiss minutes from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. China Standard Time. I would also like to remind our audience that at the bottom you have a simultaneous interpretation button to choose your language, Chinese or English. And this session is live streamed on TopLink as well as on the forum's website. Also, please engage on our social media using the English hashtag #NewChampions22 or the Chinese hashtag, which is 新领军者对话. Now, without any further delay, let's get right started with our very important and crucial topic. Renewables are expected to grow from 14% to 40% of energy demand by 2030. This means an annual global investment of $5.7 trillion will be needed in renewable energy as well as the transition-related technologies. Now, with all these technological breakthroughs and business models and infrastructures, how can we energize companies, but also countries to really help us achieve these climate action goals? Let me now introduce you our fantastic lineup of panels joining us from all around the world. First of all, it's my honor to introduce Mr. Dang Yanbao. He's the chairman of the board at Baofeng Energy from China. We also have Mr. Xiang Wenbao. He is the chairman of Sany Heavy Industry from China as well. We have Mr. Zhang Lei. He's the CEO of Envision Group, also from China. We have Veronica Scotti. She's the chairperson at Swiss Re for Public Sector Solutions. And we have Francesco La Camera, Director General at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, joining us from Abu Dhabi. We will also have very special remarks at the end of our session by Kim Huai Nio. She's the Managing Director at the Center for Nature and Climate at the WEF. We will now have a first discussion round of about 20 minutes to really get a reality check and better understand the challenges that we are all confronting. Francesco, let me start with you first of all. If we look at the global energy landscape today compared with a year ago, what are some of the biggest trends that you are seeing in the energy transition?
Thank you, Martina. Thank you for the invitation to be with you today. So what are the major trends? Generally speaking, we are assisting to the energy transition that is going on and moving to a new energy system that will be based largely on renewables and complemented by hydrogen, mainly green hydrogen, and the sustainable use of the biomass. Naturally, if we compare the situation today with 1 year ago, we have to take into consideration the Ukrainian crisis and the oil and gas crisis, the rising prices, etc. So I think that this special moment makes very clear that the old centralized system based on fossil fuel is not anymore capable to sustain development. So what we will assist is in the short term, in our point of view, some negative impact, because we have seen countries trying to find alternate way to get the gas and the need for oil, for conditioning, for heating in the very short periods. But in the medium or long term, what we are seeing is that this may bring to an acceleration of the energy transition, because there is a new element that has been added to the attention of the politicians. Because if renewables are clean and may provide more jobs, may provide more GDP, this was in some way already consolidated in the narrative. But now there is another element that is coming very strong in the political arena, as the energy security. So countries are moving, 80% of countries are still dependent on fossil fuel. So countries are moving to a decentralized system that will base, as we say, on renewables with a complement of other. So I think this is the major trend that will move in the medium or long term, the acceleration of the energy transition.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. 当中您好，全球地区和国内的变化如何对您所在行业的产生最大影响是什么？您如何看待能源创新的趋势？当中您能听到吗？当中您好，对，您可以回复。
你好，大家好，大家好。
我在说这个问题，您听到了吗？
听到了，不好意思，我这个是这个条件非常的有限，不好意思，我想回答我们主持人第一个问题。就是自工业革命以来，这个人类的大量使用的化石能源，引发了呢全球性的一个气候变化和能源危机问题。推动的能源的绿色革命，用新能源替代化石能源，也是大势所趋。国内需要用产业带动能源的转型、能源转换。在此的背景下，给能源化工行业带来了前所未有的考验与挑战，这就是要求我们必须要加速能源转换、原料转换、能源消耗转换、绿色升级，保障健康可持续的发展。那么关于能源转型啊，我认为我们要从这3大趋势来去进行来做。第一个趋势呢，就是用新能源必将成为未来的主体能源，就是我们现在认为新能源是未来的我们能源中间的一个主体能源。那么随着呢就说是新的技术、工艺，包括新的材料、新的设备，新模式的这个迭代升级，新能源的发展日益成熟，成本呢大幅降低，完全可以替代化石能源在多领域的这个规模化的应用。那么新能源已迎来了加大发展时代的这个风口，这是我们认为现在目前啊，就是新能源替代我们现在这个化石能源，就说是这是第一个。那么未来呢，我们将呢主要就说是认为呢，就是化石能源，那么当然也不会彻底退出历史舞台的，我们还是逐步的去减少。那么通过就说是这个技术升级对化石能源那么减少，通过技术升级对化石能源的绿色升级，这是我们认为。那么当然它主要还是要承担我们现在能源的这个保障安全的这个作用，这是我认为这是第一个，就是新能源替代化石能源是一个大势所趋。第二个呢，就是新能源发展还要持续加大科技的投入。那么我们认为现在就说是虽然就是比如说风电，比如说光伏发电，等等，那么现在这新能源的发展它需要还有大量的这个科技创新，比如说从材料端、设备端还要进行一个升级。那么升级的目的就是一个就是转化率要提高，再一个呢就是降低所有新能源的成本，降低所有新能源的成本。那么所以从这些方面来讲，就是我认为第二个就是要加大我们的科技要研发， 可能能对于我们促进新能源替代化石能源的一个速度。第三个趋势就是我们认为呢，现在就是利用新能源一定要去解决，比如说太阳能发电的设备端，那么把它的整个的太阳能发电的成本，我们想办法通过技术降低成熟。第二个呢，就说是我们把风力发电所有的成本通过设备的升级、转化率的提高，降低它的成本，技术的这个提升。第三个呢，就说是他们现在这一块呢，一定我们想做到一个就是要有安全性、可靠性、稳定性，但是我们认为一定还要再发展储能。那么如果没有储能，它很可能对它的这个保障性的安全可能还是有很大的问题。所以我们认为现在发展储能也是不可或缺的一部分。那么当然储能核心的问题就是成本问题。现在储能就说是来对风光这一块的来调节它的稳定性和安全性，就是要解决它储能的成本。但是储能的成本是要从现在技术上，我们认为首先从安全上现在没问题，技术上就是在能量密度上现在还需要再进一步的提升。但是我们认为现在目前来讲，应该说已经基本达到，就说是可行性，没问题。就是成本略比我们现在可能就说是化石能源略高一点，它的储能。但是我认为作为我是企业出身，我认为这一块完全现在也可以让我们在生产成本略高一点，可以接受。这就我们现在认为从这三个趋势，用这个啥呢，来用新能源替代我们的化石能源。谢谢。
好的，谢谢您呢。当中这个三个趋势是非常重要的，感谢您的看法。Mr. Chang, let's take a look into the crystal ball and ask you a very big question. How do you see the future of energy and how can we get there faster?
Thank you. So we believe the future for energy is going to be all renewables. The renewable energy is going to be the beautiful energy. Not only it is green, sustainable, but also the most importantly, the renewable energy is going to be the energy of independent, the energy of peace. And the renewable energy is everywhere, abundant. 1 minute's sun radiation is able to power the planet for a year. So it's almost free. So if we are able to harness the renewable energy by improving our technology, so we are able to create a beautiful energy future. This lower cost renewable energy, which already it is lower, as I said, and it's going to really to reduce the inflation. Think about where's the inflation coming from today? Fossil fuel volatilities, supply-demand imbalance. And so the renewable technology, without any emission. So we see all kinds of benefits. So where are all the challenges? The first challenge is cost of energy, which I said, wind and solar has been cheaper. But then the second challenge is cost of storage. We have developed the storage and in a more efficient way. So we have a long way to go. In short time, we are fine, but in terms of seasonality storage, it's a big challenge. We have to reduce the cost of storage. And the third challenge is about cost of synergy. What is cost synergy? Think about today, there's a big mismatch between renewable energy demand and renewable energy production. Renewable energy always in the remote place, abundant, but all the big cities have less renewable energy. So we have to rely on the high voltage transmission grid to really balancing this low cost of renewable energy to the demand sector. But building high voltage transmission grid take about 5 to 10 years. We are going to miss the window. So then actually envision come out solution, not only the seasonal storage. The most important is about net zero industrial park. We are going to build the industrial park in the remote area. And we are able to develop industrial cluster over there. By combining wind, solar, storage, digital solutions, and hydrogens, now we are able to harvest much lower cost of renewable energy and without emission, and also solve the issue. We have built one in Erdos, that's the capital city of coal in China. Yesterday, we announced with Prime Minister of Spain about building the first European net zero industrial park in Spain. So we are going to launch it in 2 years' time, and with using green energy to make green products. So that's a kind of solution we think we can bring to the society. Thanks.
And two very important points you have raised there, Mr. Chang. The even economic development in China really bring these energies and renewables to all different provinces in China. And then, of course, also international collaboration is key. I would like to move on to the next speaker, Mr. Xiang. Now, how do these strategies of net zero and the action plans that you are implementing impacting your organization, Sanya, which is, of course, such a big player in China and such a big corporation?
好，感谢主持人，非常高兴能够参加今天这个讨论。世界趋势现在有很多的不确定性，但是有一点是我们大家的共识，就是要减少二氧化碳气体的排放。中国政府对这个减碳工作是非常重视的，向全世界做出了承诺，就是3060计划，就是30年实现碳达峰，60年实现碳中和。这个对我们来讲既是一个巨大的挑战，但共识更加是一个巨大的机会。当然也是作为企业的一种社会责任。那么3亿呢，在碳中和这方面，我们是准备开展这么一些工作。一个呢，首先是要推动我们所经营产品的电动化。现在我们已经明确确定，不再在传统石化能源产品上面投入新的研发费用。就是要将所有的研发费用投入到电动化的产品上面开发上来。我们非常希望3亿能够成为我们现在所经营领域的，包括你比如说工程机械商用汽车这些装备的这个电动化，成为这个行业电动化的引领者，这是我们正在做的一项工作。另外一个呢，我们也在大力部署这个新能源。我们认为清洁能源、可再生能源是未来最大的一个发展机会，所以3亿呢现在正在部署光伏、风电氢，包括储能这样一些产业。大家知道，就是在6月22号我们3亿正能在上海上市这就是我们未来推动新能源发展的一个平台。现在呢，这些项目在我们3亿都已经在启动，都在进行这个投资。我们非常希望能够在新能源的开发和利用方面发挥3亿的创新优势这个做出我们自己的贡献。谢谢。
Thank you so much for giving us Sunny's perspective. Last but not least, in this first discussion round, Veronica, tell us what are currently the best practices for industries to set their objectives and make strategies to really meet this net zero goal.
Thank you, Martina. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. And thank you also for giving the CEO Climate Leaders Coalition visibility also at the New Champions event. I'm just going to touch upon 5 quick points that I think also the prior speakers have tangentially touched. It is true that the energy sector, as Francesco said, has been historically built out of governments, but we have an opportunity as business leaders, and we've heard 3 very prominent ones, to be an accelerator in this transition. So I think the first thing that companies can do, and many do, but many more could, millions could, is to actually sign up to the Paris-aligned carbon reduction pathway pledges. And this has to include both the emission aspect, and we heard it, we can all become better in the way we leave our footprint, but also a removal path, because we know that once we have reduced our emission, we can still be left with a positive footprint. And so developing technologies that are supporting the development of technologies that allow absolute net removal so that we can reduce the stock of carbon in the atmosphere, I think that's very critical. And the second thing is committing to newly developed technologies in our own consumption. So as businesses, as I said, we have operations, we have footprint, we have activities. And I think for all of our operations to be able to say, I am using renewable energy that is certified, that is of the highest quality, I think is of paramount importance. Whatever approach, whatever commitments we make, and ideally these have to be science-based commitments. We do know the science behind this, and I think it is very important that is translated across entirety of our value chain and all the activities that the business are involved into, so not just partial. And most importantly, it has to be transparently reported and independently verified. And this is important because we are in this climate of transition where there is so much uncertainty. And if we don't have independent verifications and we don't have accountability in the way we report, there's a big risk of misunderstanding, greenwashing. So it is, to me, it's paramount that we help develop standards that hold us all accountable to common measures. But I think maybe the most critical thing is what we just heard a few minutes ago. To make a real difference is when we come together as businesses and we collaborate and we contribute to the acceleration, not just of our own pathway, but that of others. I think we can do, we can have truly transformative power, because I come from the financial sector and the footprint directly of the financial sector is not that big. However, as we mobilize our risk-bearing capital, our investment capabilities, we can support the development and the mainstreaming of technologies that we know need to, as we heard, have a green price, and that green price needs to be reduced. So I'd say that is one of the most critical steps. And in that sense, and I'll finish on this, making green procurement choices is important. And that's why we became a member of the First Mover Coalitions, again, something that the WEF has been extraordinary in facilitating, because we need to put a price on carbon and we have to be able to reduce it whenever the technologies are not ready yet. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Veronica. And as you pointed out, the WEF has really played a crucial role in promoting some of these initiatives and platforms as well. I would now like to move on to the second discussion round that we are having this morning of about 25 minutes, and really focus on reactions and solutions from a business perspective, given the urgency of the energy transition. Let me start with you again, Francesco. What do you think is China's role? Of course, such an important player in this field as well of energy transition, and its goal to meet the carbon peak by 2030 and then the neutrality goal by 2060. And do you think it can be achieved, first of all?
First of all, just to react to this last part of your question, I think that China will achieve those goals before the 2030 and before the 2060.
Even.
So I think that the path that we see is already more than in line. If you look at 2030, and I'm sure that China will be there before 2060. And naturally, the role of the country is a leadership role. So they are 40% of the jobs in renewables are in China. 1/3 of the new installing capacity last year was in China. They are the main producer, distributor, user of renewable electricity. So I think that it's inevitable they are a leading role. They also move now, as we have listened to, the sector that are difficult to decarbonize, as the heavy industry and other through the hydrogen. So I think it's important working on hydrogen. Just to give you an example, we have with the WEF, we are working on building a roadmap for Europe, for Japan on green hydrogen, because it's really becoming crucial for decarbonize the sector that are difficult to decarbonize, as transport, heavy industries, long shipping, this kind of sectors.
Thank you so much. That's a very bullish outlook. Let's hope that your predictions are going to be true and realized as well. Xiang Tong, how can multinational businesses really rethink and better coordinate their business strategy and operations, not just domestically, but also overseas under these current circumstances and uncertainties?
"好，谢谢主持人。刚才讲3亿实际上已经是个跨国企业。去年啊，我们这个海外销售额超过了300亿人民币。我们也跟全球很多的商业伙伴都有很好的这个合作。尽管啊，现在出现了一些反全球化的一些思潮，但是我个人认为啊，全球化的趋势是不可逆转的，因为它能够给我们带来更多的效率，能够给我们的全世界的各人民呢带来更低成本的产品啊，更优质的产品和服务。我认为是不可逆转的。那么现在3亿呢，一方面要把中国的事情做好，就是我们正在刚才讲的，要推动我们产品的电动化、智能化，通过优质的服务为我们的中国客户啊这个创造价值啊，也靠这个继续进步啊来推动经济的增长啊，这是我们要做的一个事儿，就是我们内部叫做数字化的转型和电动化的转型啊，就是让我们的产品变得更加智能，能够呢让我们的产品变得更加绿色环保，让我们的产品啊有能力为客户创造更多的价值。另外一方面，当然我们要积极参与经济的全球化。实际上我们在中国之外已经有了13家海外工厂，将来呢我们将更多的投资海外，就是把我们企业的发展呢与各个国家的经济发展与解决各个国家的就业、创造税收，推动整个人类的进步啊，做出我们作为一个全球化企业的这么一个贡献。当然在这个过程中间我们一定要去真实履行自己的社会责任，就是也要推动我们讲的全球的清洁能源的这个开发和这个和利用啊。所以呢，国际化也是我们3亿发展的重要战略之一。我们希望呢，将来当然我们是以中国市场为主，同时呢积极参与世界经济这个循环和竞争。我们希望呢在“十四五”我们的海外业务能够获得一个比较好的增长，能够实现翻倍。这大概是我们做的一些工作。那么国际化呢，我们提了一个叫做本土化经营，就是我们应该在所有的海外这些工厂或者公司里面，主要的经营者是本地的员工。就是说刚才我提到的，就是要把我们的发展与当地社会经济的发展结合起来的一种方式。 另外的话呢，这个我们也非常的希望啊，通过我们的很好的服务啊，让我们的国际客户能够喜欢上我们的产品啊，这就是我们的一些想法。
谢谢。Now, Veronica, of course, we need all hands on deck. Everybody needs to work really hard, especially the private sector and the public sector together. So how can they better coordinate to really tackle these challenges together, the private and the public sector?
Yeah, we'll build maybe on what Chairman Wembo was just mentioning, because I think it is not a matter of do we want the transition, but how do we make it happen and make sure that, as we said, businesses today are already committed. So there are 2 or 3 things that I think we could continue to work on. The first one is the technological changes. Some of the innovation Francesco referred to, all of that requires decades to actually become fully mainstreamed in our economies. And for that, we need the leadership and the coordination with the public sector. Why? For quick reasons. First of all, we need to get rid as quickly as possible, and I emphasize the possible given the current circumstances, of the legacy that actually holds us back. So fossil fuel, for instance, subsidies are something that allow what is today already an inferior, even from a pricing perspective, technology to remain, in the mix. The second thing is cutting tariffs that on goods that are actually good from a climate perspective, and I think that will create more, demand for things that are a little bit less expensive. The third thing is developing broadly accepted carbon pricing. I bring the emphasis here because one of the biggest challenges that we have today is that a number of the externalities have not been fully realized in our, value chains. Martina, the great news here is that as a coalition of leaders from the industry across 8 supply chains globally, we've realized that the ultimate cost to the consumer will be no more than 1% to 4% higher for everyday goods if we work well through this decarbonization. So it's not a huge affordability question. It's a matter of coordinating well and creating markets that allow for that externality to be, faster recognized, which means then there is an acceleration to doing things that reflect it. And last but not least, I think Mr. Wembo brought it to the attention. This transition has to be just, and when in my relationship with governments around the world, it really gets down to a couple of points. Affordability, renewable energy in most of Europe today is already, and in China is already mainstream, but it cannot be mainstreamed in all countries in the world. The consumer price remains still very high because all of that infrastructure needs to be built. So I think it's very important that we coalesce together with governments around PPPs that allow much faster rollout of PPP frameworks or collaborations where technology can be accelerated and established on the ground at a price level that the local consumer can afford. The second thing for that to happen, the technological access has to be there. And let's be very clear, we don't have a globally equally distributed access to the know-how. So that's part of also how the just transition can happen, because it's, that's why I'm very positive that if Chinese companies and international companies around the world bring their technologies as part of their FDIs, we will create also better employment. And we need to create together with governments the education systems and the preparedness for the local population to be effectively employed. So with that, I'd say, it is part of how governments develop their NDCs, their strategies for decarbonization. And if they maintain the same robustness that we see some of the companies today on the call, demonstrating, I think we are in a more hopeful step of acceleration and certainty in the execution pathways.
Thank you so much for your important input, Veronica. 当中您好，您认为加速能源向可再生能源转型，同时保持稳定性、经济效率和可亲切性的关键解决方案是什么？
大家好，我的企业是做这个化工的，我们现在是主要是通过几个方面来去解决我们现在的这个，一个是要保证我们这能源的稳定性和经济性，还有清洁性。那么从这3个方面呢，一个呢保证能源的稳定性，就是我们现在就是要解决它现在的替代，因为我们也给自己企业就是列了，在就是20年之内，我们可以就把我们的能源进行用新能源替代化石能源，主要是解决原料端。这是一方面。第二方面呢，我们其实在现在我们的能源这个消耗呢，我们现在尽可能需要的就是用新能源的能源来替代我们的火力发电的能源，所以从这2个方面上，从能源端去做。那么但是能源端主要是原料这一块呢，我们主要是用风电和光电进行互补，然后进行做到我们的电解水，通过电解水制氢。用氢呢替代我们的化石能源制的氢，因为我们主要是生产的 PP 和 PE，PP 和 PE 是需要大量的氢，所以我们这一块呢，就是说在每年是按照3亿立方的这个氯氢来进行的增速，在目前来讲，我们已经达到了有6亿立方的这个氢，就是氯氢。所以呢，就是我们是通过了就是20年，就是把它每年按5%的这个速度去增速，最后20年形成了它就是排放区彻底基本上接近零排放了，但是我们还需要的60%的新能源来做的氯氢，那么还有40%的呢，就是这个化石能源，因为化石能源我还需要它的一氧化碳。所以这样的话呢，是排放是不排放，但我还要一部分的这个化石能源。这是我们想的用这个，第一个就是用能源稳定性，就是用新能源替代我们现在的化石能源。那么替代化石能源的做法，就是我们目前通过2个，一个就是通过自备的新能源的电力供给我们的能源端，也通过我们新能源来进行做电解水。替代我们原料端，就是做成氯氢，这是我们已经做了几年了。这个应该说我们的产量度应该在全球是最大的，这是我想的，我们是第一个。第二个经济性，就是主要现在经济性就是要新能源替代化石能源，主要就是个经济性。但目前我们认为风力发电的发展的技术上，那么这个升级。那么带来了我们现在成本上新能源的成本的下降，那么像成本上能源下降，我们现在达到基本上原料成本直接成本就是每一方成本基本在0.5人民币，0.5人民币。所以这样的话呢，就是我们再加上基本上我们就是在0.8元的这个0.8元的一个立方。所以这样的话呢，基本和我们化石能源制的氢的成本基本差不多，但是我们认为在这一块上发展的空间还很大，通过技术的变革、装备的升级，然后呢再增加上一部分的绿色金融，可以让我认为在5年之内，基本上新能源完全的成本可以替代，就是跟化石能源基本能相当，这样的话就是未来的经济性应该也是可行的。那么另外一个最后一个问题就说是能源的清洁性，那当然我们尽可能通过新能源，现在通过新能源的制造的过程中间，我们让它尽可能清洁化。比如说像我们自己也搞了一个这个用我们就是生产的多晶硅，然后再增加多晶硅的这个硅片，做这个太阳能发电的这个设备，所以我们从源头呢就用的是 新能源的能源，我们做的是直供电，就是用风光互补，再加上我们的储能，等于我们现在就是尽可能让网电，就是火力发电少用，我们现在基本能达到70%是绿电，所以在这一块逐步我们现在就把自备电的电量扩大，就是从能源端就实行做我们的新能源的设备之前，我们就是考虑它的清洁化。这是我们已经是这个项目在明年的6月份就全部都投产了。我们就从用风光互补加储能，然后我们用到了70%是绿电供给，在以后再不断的去再提高，是我们通过了这3个方向去做的。谢谢。
好的，非常感谢您 Mr. Zhang. Now, of course, we have to maintain this green momentum and keep going. Now, what roles do you think that technology, innovation, and financial tools can play in this regard?
Right. So today, we are seeing the energy transition on the surface. But what's underlying? The underlying is the technology transition. So the renewable energy fundamental is about technology because it's free. It's not a commodity by supply demand of wind or solar. So it's about technology which is producing renewable energy, storing the renewable energy, and also applying renewable energy like electric vehicles or hydrogen equipment. So that's why the technology is the key. In Envision, we categorize wind turbine and the solar energy as the new coal. It is new coal. It's replacing coal on the power generation. We have been the global leaders, and we are also pioneering on the battery and hydrogen. Why? Because we believe the new oil is all about battery and the hydrogen. They're going to replace the oil demands on the transportation sectors. So then once wind, solar, hydrogen, and the EV, this intermittent distributed renewable sources and devices dominate the system, what do we need? We need the new grid, the AIoT, AI plus Internet of Things will be the new grid. It's going to connect so much devices and orchestrate this intermittency, orchestrate this renewable energy diversification, distribution. So once we combine the new oil, new coal, and new grid, what do we create? We create the new infrastructure. That's what we are doing now in Spain, which is going to be net zero industrial park. This net zero industrial park will be the foundation for the green industrial revolution. Think about the factory is outcome the first industrial revolution. Then the green industrial park, because it's going to integrate renewable energy production with renewable energy consumption. It's going to be the most important building block, which is going to be copied around the world. Then we can play lots of things, which is going to be the new industrial. What is the new industrial? For applying renewables. For instance, synthetic biology. What we believe is going to replace the petrochemical and the coal chemicals. This kind of, recyclable bio-based material is going to apply the carbon which is coming from straws or whatever plants, or come from algae. They absorb carbon from the atmosphere. So then we create a carbon cycle from air to our factory, to our table, and back to air again, without cycle the carbon from underground coal and oil. So the new industrial is going to be synthetic biology or hydrogen-based economy. So this 5 new is what Envision is pursuing and developing. In terms of the financial sector, which is also as important as the technology. Why? Because think about for next 30 years, hundreds of trillions of dollars is going to build, to put into society, to build infrastructure, and you really need a long sight. Today, you are driven by shareholder, but you should be aware, you should be also driven by stakeholders. Lots of policy in terms of carbon pricing is not there yet. So you have to pricing in first. Otherwise, will be too late. Once the policy kick in, you have huge exposure. So we need visionary money to boost this such a transition as well. Thanks.
Absolutely. Mr. Chang, Envision has a very beautiful vision, and I hope that it is going to be that way. But of course, there are many roadblocks in the way. I would like to ask one follow-up question to Francesco as well. What are some of the challenges to this multi-stakeholder approach that also the World Economic Forum is advocating, and which might hinder this beautiful green industrial revolution?
So naturally, the role of all the actors is absolutely relevant. This is a reason for Arena that we put in place this collaborative framework where we have together the stakeholders, the private sector, the government, to try to discuss and find solution for all the topics related to the energy transition. So that's inevitable. And when we talk about the role of the public and the private, I think it's very important for China. I think it's been said that the role of the grid. So naturally, for having more renewables into the grids, into the system, we need to have a grid that are flexible, interconnected, balanced. And we have been working with the Chinese government on such area of interest. The role of hydrogen in the new energy system is relevant. So also there is important to build a roadmap that may maybe say clearly how China could move and accelerate the energy transition. My last thought, and because I already wish to stay in the minutes I was supposed to be, is that my last message, that also is the message that I've heard from some, especially from Mr. Zhang. So the energy transition is there, is in place. So there is no doubt, it's unstoppable. We are going to a new energy system that will be based on renewables and complemented by hydrogen, mainly green hydrogen, and sustainable biomass, has been said. There is no doubt. What is at stake is the speed and the scale of this transition, because we are all, as humanity, we have to stick with the achievement of Paris Agreement goals. So we have to accelerate this path in rapidly and dramatically if we want to be in time to avoid the dramatic impact of climate change.
Grazie mille, Francesco. Now, in discussion round 3, I would like to invite all the panelists in 1 or 2 sentences to just give their recap and their key takeaway. If I may start with you just now, Francesco, in 1 or 2 sentences at maximum, what is your key takeaway from this session today?
My main takeaway is connected with what I say. What is at stake today is the speed and the scale of the energy transition, not the energy transition as such. China and the world has to accelerate their path, and hydrogen and green hydrogen may be one of the main actors in this run.
Mm-hmm. Dang Tong, Mr. Dang, would you like to give your key takeaway as well in 1 or 2 sentences, please?
喂，你好，听到吗？
可以了，可以了。
你好。推动能源转型，守护绿色地球，是我们每一个企业和个人都应承担的责任和义务。特别是能源企业，更要发挥示范的带头作用，积极推动技术变革、产业转型和低碳发展，为我们的子孙后代留下蓝天绿地、水清的 美丽家园。谢谢。
Thank you so much. Now let's move on to Mr. Xiang for his key opinion on the topic.
我想啊，我们应该携手合作，推动这个新能源革命，让我们的生活啊更低碳，让我们的环境更美好。
Thank you so much. 非常感谢您 Veronica.
Well, for me, Martina, the critical steps are about the speed again, and for that there needs to be an openness to collaborate and to include everyone that needs this transition, because it is a global exercise, and combine that visionary leadership with a perseverance in execution. It's extremely important that we're very, very focused on executing.
Thank you also to you, grazie mille. Last but definitely not least, Mr. Chang, your key takeaway.
Right. Envision's mission is about to solve the grand challenge facing the humanity. That's our mission. What is the real grand challenge today? It's climate crisis. We only have 20 years or 30 years windows. It's once passing the tipping point, it's irreversible. I call for everyone, don't look up. Now, although moving to Mars, we can do sooner or later. Going to metaverse, we can do sooner or later. But let's focus, let's facing the biggest challenge. With a strong will, we believe this is not only about challenge. We are also create a beautiful energy world and create so many opportunities for our generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our fantastic panelists, but the session is not over yet. We still have 2 closing remarks, and it's my great honor to announce that we have Her Excellency, the Environment Minister of Egypt, joining us now for her closing remarks. It's Her Excellency Dr. Yasmin Fouad of Egypt, the Minister of Environment. Of course, very important because, as you all know, we have upcoming the UN COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh to be held in Egypt in November. Her Excellency, can you hear me? Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you very well. Let me start by thanking you for convening that very important session in a very critical time of the year 2022, where the world is facing so many challenges, whether they are geopolitical challenges or the pandemic, or even the way the climate change has been harsh on everyone. At the outset, as you mentioned in your introduction, Egypt is hosting the upcoming COP27. We call that COP the COP for implementation. We're glad that the Paris rulebook is almost finalized. We aim to build on the successes that came out from Glasgow on all fronts, on mitigation, on adaptation, loss and damage, and finance. But as this session is focused on energy, I'd like to give some key messages in the closing remark here. The first message is that without energy, there will not be an availability of a life on our planet Earth. But what kind of energy are we looking for? We're looking for the clean, green, sustainable forms of energy to the whole world, to every single country that is there on the planet. That is in itself is a challenge right now with energy prices going up and even the energy supplies. What we see is very important is what we call the just and ambitious transition. The transition to the affordable, renewable energy in a transitional and transformative paradigm shift will be a key process during the upcoming COP27. In that regard, throughout the presidency program, Egypt has dedicated an energy day to start discussing the implementation of the just and ambitious transition. That would include the following. That would include the different success stories that happened around the world at different sizes. When we're talking about the small PVs and their availability and affordability in terms of technology and packages of finance. When we're talking about the medium size and the link between the renewable energy efficiency, and the industrial sector. When we're talking about private sector and large investment in renewable, whether they are solar, wind, or now the green hydrogen, which is a vast opportunities for countries and for the private sector to fulfill their commitments that they made from Paris onward to Glasgow. These are all topics that we would like to discuss. And as you see, those topics are not only about research or theories or papers or even ideas of projects. What we would like to bring to the COP is actual implementation that happened on the ground at the different categories, including even the local communities that could be further replicated and upscaled. No extra time. That we don't have really an extra time or even a time for a trial and error. The second topic that Egypt thinks is very important to also start discussing that kind of dialogue is what we call the Decarbonization Day. I know that part of all the discussion that happened in the COP is that there are heavy industries like the cement, like the steel, like even the oil and gas that would like to be part of that process. But how can they be part? We need to answer three questions here. First of all, what kind of real commitments that they can do in order to adopt a low carbon pathway? Secondly, what kind of technologies that could be there that are proven to be viable and doable that could be implemented? Thirdly, what kind of financial packages that could be part of that process in order to implement those technologies? The Decarbonization Day is an opportunity not only for implementation, but to start that kind of dialogue. If we're talking about COP27, as we call it, a COP that is inclusive, we cannot leave anyone behind. Anyone that would be left behind will be delaying our process and not connecting the dots together. Finally, what is really important also for COP27 to bring to the developing country, to the global south, is what kind of innovative financial packages, from blended finance, from debt swap, from grants, from even packages for local communities that they can depend on. Egypt has recently launched its climate change strategy 2050 with very specific objectives and KPIs on mitigation and adaptation. But the idea is that when you're talking about climate, you cannot talk about mitigation and adaptation without talking about governance structure, without talking about finance, and without talking about the part related to the research. Recently, as part of our efforts to show our commitment, we have submitted our updated NDC few days ago, although it was requested to be there at COP27. But the reason why we've done that is that, first of all, we've put quantitative targets for the energy sector, for the transport, for the oil and gas and the electricity. Secondly, we are showing how can we really work on structural reform for agriculture and water. And thirdly, we'd like to urge other countries for that updated NDC. Finally, to be innovative from the energy sector, Egypt has just finalized a package of implementation that we call food, water, and energy, a kind of a support package that we would like to present at the COP27. When we are expanding in renewable energy in a world of 2022 that is facing the food crisis and a food security issue and prices that are high for both food and energy, and water is still scarce in some parts of the world, and it will get worse with the impact of climate change, Egypt would like to bring to the world that renewable energy could be a solution rather than a challenge, to use it for example, the desalination of the power plants using solar energy, or by using the pumps that use renewable energy for agriculture. Such package of food and water and energy nexus is now reality. And now it's not theory that we're trying to implement, but actual package for implementation that everyone can have a stack. So the technical assistant can be there, the grant, the large investment, the feed-in tariff, and the banking sector. And these are the kind of things that we would like to link up together. You cannot keep talking about the topic related to mitigation and adaptation without keeping the balance and showing the co-benefit of one another. You cannot discuss that without having the financial packages that are different and diversified. And you cannot discuss that in a way or delinking that from the human needs. Thank you very much.
Shukran Gazilan Laki Mutashakira Awi. Thank you very much for your closing remarks. We only have a short moment left now, and I would like to invite Ms. Kim Hwai Nio, the managing board member of the World Economic Forum, and also who is heading the Center for Nature and Climate, inviting her now on the virtual stage for her closing remarks, and then we have to wrap it up already.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Minister, for your remarks. Thank you, Martina, for moderating this session. And thank you to the panelists for your interventions and insight. It is inspiring to hear how each of you are leading climate action in your capacities to energize our green transition. And no doubt, our climate commitments will demand extraordinary efforts from all stakeholders, including business corporations. And I would like to encourage all of us to continue to emphasize on speed, scale, and partnerships to help progress the agenda forward. About 7 years ago, we set up an alliance of CEO climate leaders, and this global business community has since gathered 120 CEOs from 26 countries in 12 industries. The alliance meets regularly to raise ambition, exchange best practices, and also proactively engage leaders in other sectors to strengthen the nexus between business, policy, and science for a holistic and systemic transformation. Last year, all members of this alliance committed to reduce emissions by more than 1 gigaton of CO2 equivalent annually by 2030. And we hope to replicate this community model in China. Earlier this year, in recognition of China's importance to the global economy and the significant contributions it can make to the climate crisis, the forum decided to set up a dedicated climate action team in China. And this team right now proactively engages with Chinese companies to decarbonize sectors of the energy, materials, and mobility sectors in support of China's climate commitments. To strengthen the efforts further, we are setting up a carbon neutrality community among Chinese companies. And what will this community do? First, the community will connect the upstream and downstream activities of the supply chain, demonstrate and commercialize the use of green technologies, as well as develop and pilot innovative business models and financial instruments. As what the minister has emphasized, we need to think about implementation and execution. And we hope that this community will also enable the cross-border sharing of best practices, be at the leading edge of climate action, provide a role model for best-in-class activities, and showcase China's actions on the world stage. It will be a platform to take success stories to the rest of the world. And I would like to extend an invitation for leaders in Chinese corporations and other partners to join in this community effort. And thank you for your attention. Back to you, Martina.
Thank you very much to all the panelists, to all the participants, to the audience, of course, and also to the WEF for this crucial work. And now let's take some action, all of us around the world. It's been my great pleasure. Of course, much more coming up here on this platform today, but that's all from us for the time being. 非常感谢大家的参加今天的活动，再见。